I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County Mayor, and we have a very special guest with us today. And I am thrilled that he has found time out of his working schedule and joined us over here today. Jim Hayes. How are you,
My
Jim?
pleasure to be here, Rogers. I appreciate the invitation.
Before we get into this, is one of those special shows that we have, and people are watching, and we're trying to find some mature individuals to be on our show. Talk a little bit about Williamson County. And there's two areas I want to concentrate with you. Number one, the radio business as we know it in Williamson County, and I know you've got a history that goes back several years. We leave it at that. And number two is out from Franklin Road, there's a farm that the city is developing. It's called Harlingsdale.
Right.
No, you've got a
Was born there.
Born there. Got a long history there. So it should be an exciting few minutes that we have time to communicate. But before I do that, you got to tell me a little bit about Jim Hayes, where you came from. I know who you're married to.
Right. Well, you know, I'm one of those rare birds called a native of Williamson County, and I was born on Harlingsdale Farm in one of the houses there in 1940. So I'm 68 years old at the day we taped this. And my background is strictly local. Attended Franklin Public Schools, Franklin High School, David Lipscomb University, and Vanderbilt University. Came back home after graduation, married my childhood sweetheart, Judy Hayes, and began working in the radio business when I was a 16-year-old. I was a part-time 16-year-old disc jockey at AM 950 in Franklin. And I decided that I liked that business better than my field of training, which was chemistry. And
Well, I didn't know that.
right, and I went. Last time I saw a test tube was in 1962. So I went immediately into the radio business and have been there ever since. And in 2008, I have marked 52 years in the radio trade.
A couple of years ago, I know I had the opportunity to attend the celebration out at the WSM Tower.
Right, landmark.
And you were there. You took me down in the dungeons. I don't think you called it that, but it was a dungeon. And I'm not sure a guy of my size could get up and down those steps real easily. Probably if I went up and down them more often, I could get up and down those steps easily. But let's talk about the radio business here in Williamson County. That had to be an exciting time to be a 16-year-old learning and
Well, let me carry you back to 1932. Of course, that was before I was born. And that was the time that WSM built that big diamond-shaped tower that everybody sees and marvels at every day when they go up and down I-65. And they were the first radio station to actually locate in Williamson County. Now, they had been on the air since 1925, but they had transmitted from downtown Nashville. And so they moved out right in the middle of the Depression and built this huge structure. At that time, that company was owned by the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. So it was a marvel then, and it's a marvel today. And that was the first broadcast radio entity that came to Williamson County, although it was not licensed to Williamson County. It, of course, was licensed to Nashville. Now, the first first radio station of our own for us was 950 AM in Franklin, now known with the call sign WAKM, and it went on the air in 1953, and has been in continuous service since then, and has always been locally owned and locally operated as it is today, and I'm one of the owners. And of course, in the interim period of many, many years, we've had other radio stations come and go in Williamson County. We have 1380, which is a Spanish-speaking station in Franklin. We have a station in Fairview, which is also Spanish-speaking as of this taping. We have a station licensed to Brentwood that's actually located in Nashville. It's all sports. And at one time, we had an FM station licensed to Franklin that has moved to Nashville. So there's been a lot of radio in Williamson County. But the only community-oriented station was, in 1953, AM 950 and continues to be that way today.
Jim, today's modern technology, and I know that you have to deal with, in fact, before we went on the show, the taping of this show, we were talking about budgets,
Right.
dollars and cents, and the market shares and things like that. In my way of looking at things and getting the message out, there's still a huge need
Right.
for AM radio.
Well, AM radio has been the most resilient thing we have ever had in the field of communications. It served a vital role during the 30s. Remember back, you can't remember, and I can't remember, but a lot of the viewers out there can remember, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fireside chats that brought us from a condition not unlike we're facing right now and gave us all a sense of renewed hope. Then it was World War II, and radio was the source of news for the war. And then as the soldiers came back after we won the war, radio began to spring out into the smaller communities. Now ours has been a thrust from the beginning to provide local news as a top priority. Whatever happens in our community comes first. And I think there always has been and there always will be a significant number of people every day who want that information. And the only place they can get it is their local radio station.
Well, and one of the probably most famous ones that WAKM has today in 2008 has got to be starting here at 12 o'clock or
Trade time.
12:15, trade time.
Right. And you know, I did trade time in 1956 as a 16-year-old. And what's so really funny about trade time, I think, and we have an awful lot of new people. Like I can go by their accents. You know, I can almost tell you're from New York, you moved down from Ohio. But we still got that core number of people that want to buy a goat or trade a used lawnmower or do something that is just part of a human being's everyday life. You know, they're looking for a part to go on their car.
Or they're looking for a bargain.
Or a bargain. And that's still one of our highest rated periods of the day, and attracts people now from 23 counties, believe it or not.
How do you maintain WAKM for the next 5 and 10 years?
It's going to be tough. You know, our number of businesses who are locally owned, and they have always traditionally been the supporters of local broadcasting. And keep in mind, broadcast stations don't get $1 from the government. As a matter of fact, we have to pay an annual fee to be there to the government. So every single dollar that we need to operate has to come through advertising sales or asking people to support a particular project that we're going to get involved in and do. It's getting tougher and tougher to do that. And of course, I guess I'm prejudiced because I look at a community's radio station as an irreplaceable item. Once it's gone, it's gone. And that source of communication is lost forever. So we're living in a very tough market, and radio people have never made a lot of money, with radio. My own personal way of making a living, I had to do engineering on the side to make a living for all these years. So it is a tough business.
You've had several people I know that have gone through working for you, working for the station. One of them is a voice that if you're a sports enthusiastic individual, you would recognize this gentleman's voice.
Well, you'll have to refresh my memory because we've had several like that.
Well, I'm speaking now of the Tennessee Titans.
Oh yeah. They were talking about Keith.
Keith.
Now Keith has never really worked for us, but he's been so closely associated with us. I think that's probably generally assumed. And he is one of the great ones, that has come out.
Got a great voice.
Got a great voice and knows his trade. Another one, though, that a lot of people don't know about, who started with us from the very beginning, long before I was there, is Ralph Emery.
Yes.
Now, interestingly enough, I was throwing away some old files about a year ago, and I found Ralph's pay record for 1953-54, and he made the grand total of $37.50 a week. So I guess he's come a long way.
Yes.
But he's one of those that stepped through. We've had a lot of people that were musicians, like Johnny Duncan. Remember Johnny Duncan, the great country star? Johnny and I were disc jockeys together at AM 950, and he was there for 2 or 3 years. So people have used it as a stepping stone. That's true. But the core folk who wanted to work in radio were there and are still there every day.
Well, I guess two things I want to comment, and we'll get off this comment. Number one is correct me on Keith. I'd always thought he did, but come think of it, I believe he's a product of BGA.
He's a product of PGA,
and that's right. Probably where he got it. And then the second thing is, if Johnny Duncan came through there and made it in the music business, I guess you'll have some songs or a hit here pretty soon. It's just waiting for that time.
Well, Johnny, was a unique individual. He came along in his career at the wrong time because he was the crooner of country music. The only problem was we had another crooner named Ray Price, who was hitting at the same time. So I don't think Johnny was a Columbia recording artist, and he made some wonderful records with Janie Fricke. But he just never got the resources behind him that he needed to be superstar status.
Put on a different hat.
Okay.
Take me over to the wonderful facility that the city is working on called Harlingsdale, and talk to me about Jim Hale.
Harlingsdale is my home. I was born there, obviously, and the city is now building roads and fences and improvements through my home. Will always be so. But Harlingsdale is the mother church of the walking horse breeding industry. It began in 1935. Was by W.W. Harlan was the founder who owned it. And he was looking for a place to raise his family of 4 boys so they wouldn't be confined to Nashville. He was a farmer by rearing, a horseman, lover of horses. He came to Franklin, bought what we know as Harlingsdale Farm, and began to breed Tennessee walking horses because they were gentle, and if they threw his boys, they wouldn't be thrown quite as hard. But that developed, and then a year or two later, he brought my dad down to Tennessee to join him to manage the farm. And about that time, they found and bought a black stallion, whose name at the time was Joe Louis. He was named after the great heavyweight champion. And they changed his name to Midnight Sun. They won 2 World Grand Championships with him, but more particularly, that horse became the foundation sire of the walking horse industry. And over his 20-plus years of producing little baby horses, nowadays, if you look at pedigrees and study pedigrees, 99% of all walking horses trace their ancestry back to Midnight Sun and Harlingsdale Farm. It operated at its present location for 73 years, which I think in itself is just an unbelievable run. 73 years. My dad was there for 45 until his death as the operator. My cousin Bill Harlan has continued the tradition. He's just finished building a replica of the big green and white barn at his place at College Grove, and they are in the process of relocating all the horses there, and we'll continue, I think, to breed Tennessee walking horses for a long time.
Now, Jim, if my memory serves me correct, was Midnight eventually laid to rest there?
Yes, he's buried right there in front of the barn. Now, I don't know and certainly can't speak for the city. Their first intention, of course, was to restore that barn because it is by the premier viewscape on that part of the Franklin landscape, and put a small museum in it. But the horse itself, the horse is buried there on the front lawn as a marker. They just recently, by the way, that whole farm lies in other historically significant grounds because it was part of the Battle of Franklin and the movement of both Federal and Confederate troops. So there is a marker now that's been placed right near the grave of Midnight Sun, sort of giving you an oversight of how that farm played a role in the Battle of Franklin. So it's historical. Also, it's the home of the last remaining continuous roadbed of the old Franklin interurban.
Well, and that brings me to, and I don't know how much you know about it, I find that you know a little bit about a lot of different things.
Well, I fake it pretty well.
Well, you're kind of like a referee, like I used to be. If you weren't real sure, just blow the whistle real loud. Got to make a call. But I also know in stone's throw of the barn, there was a early day of a utility company.
Right. If you drive down to the big green and white barn and look to your left, you'll see a big square-looking brick building. Now that was the original generating station for the Franklin Power Company. Uh, Back in the days before we had TVA and TVA delivered power to be distributed, you had to make it yourself. So that power company was put there to furnish power for the Franklin Interurban. But later in its life, it sold electricity to the city of Franklin. And up until just a few years ago, all the old generating equipment was still in the sub-basement of that building. It was a coal-fired steam generating plant. And there was a railroad spur line that you can see evidence of today that delivered the coal that produced the electricity.
And you talk about the urban line, and of course, if you've lived any time here in Franklin in the last 5 to 10 years, you can see the trolleys running.
Sure.
There's mixed emotions about that.
And they are made to look just like the old interurban trolley cars look.
And that was my point. And now they've got a new piece of equipment over there. They call it the TOD. I think that stands for Transit on Demand, that you can pick up the phone and call, and they will come to your house within a certain geographic area. Jim, with all of and we're kind of getting into a different area, but it's always great to talk with you because you've got such a history of the things that have occurred in the past, and quite oftentimes history does have a way of repeating itself and coming back around. Lots of energy, lots of money going in to try to move people from one spot to the other. Interesting that in those early days that the interurban.
It's hard to say.
It is. That would run from Franklin to
Nashville. It had actually the interurban was the first leg of a planned multi-leg service, and it never got built. But the interurban actually circled the square in Franklin, went through the almost parallel with Highway 31 through Brentwood, down to the square in Nashville, and circled the square in Nashville and came back home. And you could, I believe you could catch an interurban car every 30 minutes. I'm not sure about that. The interurban was being converted to rubber tire buses when I was just a 4 or 5 year old. Now the plans of the original owners, and by the way, the Mayberry family were very involved in this, heavy investors in this, prominent family here in Franklin. The ultimate plan, as I understand it, was to make similar loops to different cities outside Nashville. In other words, they would plan eventually a transportation wheel with different spokes that connected the interlying area. That was the beginning of the Franklin growth out of Nashville. And just think back to 1907, how isolated you were if you were 20 miles away from something, and that was the distance. So all of a sudden there was a railroad that you could ride back and forth for a very nominal sum. And I can remember people telling me that merchants would stay open for the last train to take advantage of the business.
Of course, today we're not worried about getting people for the same reasons from point A to point B, but we need to get people.
We absolutely do.
Absolutely, but you know, it's not a matter of people didn't have a mode of transportation. Quite the contrary. All of us have got at least one vehicle.
But when the city gets Harlansdale, where the public will be allowed to go and roam, and that's coming soon, I'm told, you'll be able to look and see where the old and urban cross the Harpeth River. And there would be about a mile to a mile and a half of pathway there, which is very distinctive track roadbed. And you think back and you're walking on area that was transportation in 1907, and we don't have anything to do that today in 2008.
Jim, when you talk about the Tennessee walking horse business, most of us know that in Shelbyville is where they have the event every August.
Right, celebration.
How did we lose that to Shelbyville?
Well, I think, first of all, the celebration started, by the way, as a school fundraising event for the Bedford County High School, and it started behind Bedford County High School on the football field. It was just like some people got together, and I happen to have known in my lifetime 2 of the founders of the celebration. And I asked them that question because I interviewed one of them before he passed away. And basically they said, well, it was like we needed to raise some money for the school. And we just thought we would have a horse show. So it all began sort of as an accident. And then, of course, the walking horse began to develop around Shelbyville more so than other areas because, frankly, it was more agricultural. That Williamson County had already begun, even back then, to become residential. So I don't think it was a matter of losing it. I think they had the idea, they formed it. Just so happened that the main player on the stage, historically, didn't come from Shelbyville. He came from Franklin. And so Harlansdale was a little island away from Shelbyville, and still is, for that matter. So it's a unique place.
Well, the family, though, even today, when the Harlansdale farm was purchased, the city purchased that here a few years ago.
4 years, I believe.
Still very involved in our
Oh,
community.
yes. Bill Harlan, who is the son of W.W. Harlan, still maintains probably one of the highest levels of interest I've ever seen anybody entertain and maintain. And Bill is in his mid-80s, so he has a tremendous energy for this. And his goal in life has been the breeding goal. It has been to improve the breed, to make the breed better. And I think he and the men who came before him have done that. And it all happened right out there at Harlansdale Farm. Someone asked me the other day how many horses did I think had ever been on the farm. Well, we know that Midnight Sun produced about 2,500, just that one stallion. And at one time or the other, there were as many as 8 or 10 stallions there, plus the farm's own horses. So the numbers get staggering over a period of 73 years. And all those horses went around the country to serve people, become companion animals. Most of them become companion animals.
Sure.
Very few of them wind up at the celebration. In other words, Harlansdale, for example, sells a tremendous number of horses every year to California, Oregon, the trail states, we call them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jim, because I know we don't have a great deal of time left, but there's so many things I'd like to pick your mind. I know you've been involved in the early days. You're still involved. In fact, after we finish the show, you and I'll probably journey over to the Rotary.
Right.
There's a long history of you with the Rotary, the
Right.
Rotary Club here in Franklin, the Noon Rotary. I know that.
Well, maybe I'll come back and talk about that.
Well, that's a full story.
Right, that's
We've
full
had the
story.
opportunity to have Mr. Moody on here.
The rodeo is a fabulous story.
There are so many things, and you have spent a great deal of your time today on WAKM of talking a little bit about the history. Quite frankly, the idea to have this show came from two avenues. One, you were doing it over on the radio side, and I was a little jealous of that, so I said, we'll just come over here and make a permanent record of it. And I enjoyed your comments the other day and talking to you. You'd kind of like to have a few of these shows to run over here.
They're good.
The other side of that part that made me look at it, I was up in East Tennessee, and they were doing this same thing. It was a great love for people to know about the history. If you had to, and I'm going to put you on the spot, which is not going to be hard for you to get out of the spot, but if you had to pick one item, just one item that has changed Franklin forever, could have been the interstate of I-65, which I know you were around, because I was around during those days when it came through, not here, but up in East Tennessee where I'm from. If there was just one item that's made a remarkable difference and changeover, pull it out of the air.
What would it be? It would be that moment or period in time. It's not an item. It's a change of mindset. When Franklin and Williamson County decided that they did not want to be every town USA, that we didn't want to look just like every other little town, whether it be in Kansas or Alabama or Missouri. We wanted to be different. And then we realized we have this great treasure, and the great treasure is our history. And the great treasure are our lands, our beautiful lands. We need, when Franklin and Williamson County decided to protect those things, to protect our history, teach it to the next generation, protect our lands as much as we can, protect our historical structures, protect our historic animals, that would be what I'd pick.
Interesting, interesting. I probably wouldn't disagree with you. And that was way. It's been a process, been an evolution that we've got to here today.
It's really been interesting to me. From time to time, I'll get invited to speak to newcomers. And at first, I would think, well, what can I talk to these people about? They certainly can't be interested in the history, but that's the first thing they want to hear about. They really are amazed that here's an old fat bald man that can remember so much. And they want to hear about it. And they want me to tell them how Franklin's Main Street was in the 40s and 50s, and how the schools were, and where the churches were, and where the great lands were. They want to know that now.
You've had and continue to have, a wonderful life.
Well, I believe I have.
You can see it on your face. You can see it in the expressions and the way that you communicate with people, whether it's one-on-one here on the TV show or out in the general public. I get to hear that. I'm sure there are many things that we could wrap up the last couple of minutes we've got. Pull something out that you'd like to share in the last minute to minute and a half that you'd like to touch on. I'd love to have you back. We'll make plans to do that, to talk about other things.
I'd like to talk to you about the rodeo and the Rotary, because it's significant. Well, to answer your question, I think an old black gentleman told me one time, he worked for years for R.C. Alexander in the automotive business, and he was friends with everybody, and I became his friend. And his advice one time when we were going through some tough times, another recession, was to keep sweeping, because his job was sweeping. And I think that's what I would say. In other words, we as a community need to keep sweeping. We need to keep doing the good things that we do and get rid of the bad things that we do, if we have any. Just keep refining what we have till it gets better and better.
And we have so many new people moving to our town, as you've indicated, that want to know the history. They have fell in love with something that you have
They
grown
have
up
bought
on.
their little piece of Mayberry. That's what they're doing.
And they are excited to protect. They are excited to live here. And of course, it goes without saying, maybe to keep on sweeping, we do need to keep on sweeping. Maybe that's a good motto to have. But at the same time, we have to be constantly reminded that things change. And it is hard, and we have to change with them.
That's correct.
Jim Hayes, always great
Thanks
to be
a million,
with you.
Mayor. Good to talk to you.
Hope you have the opportunity to come back. Again, I'm Rogers Anderson, Williams County's mayor. It's been my pleasure to be talking to Jim Hayes today. Have a good day.